Welcome to Living Your Senior Life, the podcast that helps you navigate your senior years with confidence, joy, and practical advice. We're Mark and Debbie, and today we are diving into something that a lot of us do not think about until something nudges us to pay closer attention: food labels. Specifically, the 5 things that are worth checking every time you pick up a packaged food at the grocery store, and why they start to matter a little more once you hit your 50s and beyond. Now, before we dive in, I want to be clear, neither Debbie nor I are doctors or nutritionists. This is just 2 neighbors sharing what we have learned, and as always, anything specific to your health situation is a conversation worth having with your own doctor. But we think you are going to find this one really useful. So grab a cup of coffee, tea, or your water, get comfortable, and let's get started.
If you eat like a standard turkey sandwich on everyday packaged bread for lunch today, you might actually be consuming more sodium than if you just sat down and ate an entire family-sized bag of potato chips.
That's just wild to think about.
Right. I mean, you sit down thinking you're making this responsible, healthy choice, totally unaware that you've just flooded your system with, well, a preservative payload, one that's designed for shelf stability, not human biology.
Exactly. And that really sets the stage for what we're talking about today.
It does. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to completely decode the grocery store aisles. We want to strip away all those flashy marketing graphics on the front of the box to uncover what the numbers on the back are actually doing to our bodies.
And to do this, we're grounding our exploration in this really candid, deeply relatable guide from a writer over at Living Your Senior Life.
Yeah, it's an article titled 5 Things I Never Checked on Food Labels Until After 50. Though, of course, the lessons apply to all of us. But the author admits that for decades they were just a passive consumer. They grabbed boxes totally blindly.
Right. If the cardboard shouted low fat or, whole grain, boom, right into the cart.
Exactly. But then turning 50 brought what they describe as quiet nudges. Feeling slightly more sluggish, a little more bloated. The old way of eating it simply stopped working.
And we should establish right up front that we are looking at this through the lens of empowerment, right? Not medical advice or dietary panic.
Oh, for sure. Anyone with specific health conditions definitely needs a doctor's input.
Right. What we're exploring here is how the simple act of flipping a package over and just decoding 5 specific metrics can fundamentally return a sense of control over your own health.
I love that.
Because the author's experience of hitting 50 and suddenly feeling the impact of their food choices, it isn't a personal failing, it's a profound biological shift.
Yeah, let's talk about that shift. The author notes that the metabolism just becomes much less forgiving around that age. And I want to look at the mechanics of those quiet nudges, because it isn't just about weight gain, is it?
No, not at all. We are talking about cellular and systemic changes. So, for example, arterial stiffening.
I mean, what does that mean exactly?
Well, as we age, the blood vessels naturally lose some of their elasticity. The endothelial cells that line those vessels, they just don't produce as much nitric oxide.
And nitric oxide is the molecule that helps them relax and dilate, right?
Exactly. And on top of that, the kidneys also undergo a functional shift. By the time you reach 50, your kidneys are simply not as efficient at filtering out excess minerals from your bloodstream as they were when you were like 25.
Wow. Okay, so stiff vessels and slower kidneys. That sounds like a recipe for trouble.
It is. And then you add a natural, gradual increase in insulin resistance, where your cells they don't respond as quickly to insulin's signal to absorb glucose.
Ah, I see.
So when you combine the stiffer arteries, the slower kidneys, and the sluggish glucose uptake, a heavy meal isn't just a bump in the road anymore.
Right. It's like, okay, think of it like a car. When you're in your 20s, your metabolism is like a car with brand new, highly forgiving shock absorbers. You can hit any bumpy road, any fast food meal, and you don't even feel it.
I love that analogy, yes.
But after 50, those shocks wear down. And suddenly you start feeling every single pothole. And in this case, the pothole is the food you're eating. Your body just has to work significantly harder to maintain homeostasis.
Which physically manifests as that sluggish, bloated feeling the author described.
Right. And that physiological reality makes the author's very first realization so impactful, because the #1 culprit they identified wasn't sugar, which I think a lot of people might expect.
No, it was sodium, the sneaky sodium trap.
Yes. We all expect chips and canned soup to be salty. But the author was stunned to find massive sodium loads in foods that taste completely neutral.
Oh, absolutely. Things like cottage cheese.
Yes. And deli turkey? Even breakfast cereal. But the big one, the one we mentioned at the top of the show, is everyday bread.
Bread is perhaps the ultimate Trojan horse for sodium in the modern American diet.
It's crazy. Some slices of bread have more sodium than a serving of chips. But why? Why is it even in there?
Well, people assume salt in food is just there to stimulate the taste buds. But in the realm of ultra-processed food, sodium is an industrial tool.
An industrial tool.
Yeah. So in baking, manufacturers use heavy doses of sodium to control the yeast fermentation process. If the yeast ferments too quickly, the dough expands too much and it just collapses.
Oh, wow. So the sodium acts like a chemical brake on the yeast.
Exactly. And it also acts as this microscopic scaffolding. The sodium actually strengthens the gluten network in the dough, creating these tiny resilient cages that trap moisture.
And that trapped moisture is what prevents the bread from drying out and crumbling after sitting on a grocery store shelf for like 2 weeks.
You got it. And here's the kicker, when you ingest that bread, those same moisture-trapping properties go to work in your bloodstream.
Oh, yikes. So your body retains water to dilute that massive influx of sodium, right?
Yes, which increases your blood volume. And that puts immediate pressure on those newly stiffened 50-year-old blood vessels we just talked about.
That makes so much sense. But it's so frustrating because it doesn't even taste salty.
Because that sodium is meticulously balanced with added sugars and refined flours, your tongue never even registers the food as salty.
Wow. So what are the actual numbers we should be looking at here?
Well, general medical guidelines suggest staying under 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, and many doctors advise patients over 50 to aim for 1,500 milligrams, especially if they're managing hypertension.
And yet a single can of seemingly healthy vegetable-heavy whoop can easily pack 800 to 900 milligrams. That's more than half your day's allowance in one bowl.
Exactly. Which is why the author adopted a really pragmatic rule. If a single serving has more than 400 to 500 milligrams of sodium, they pause.
They don't ban it outright.
No, it triggers a moment of conscious evaluation. Is this worth it?
I like that. But here's the thing. That 400 milligram threshold is entirely meaningless if the food manufacturer is playing games with the serving size.
Oh, the serving size illusion, yes.
Right. I mean, you can't accurately measure your sodium or your calories if the baseline metric is a total illusion.
It is incredibly frustrating for consumers. The author shares this really common experience. You grab a small, seemingly single-serve bag of convenience store crackers.
Oh, I've done this so many times. The front boldly claims like 200 calories.
Right, but it isn't until you inspect the microscopic print on the back that you realize that tiny bag is classified as containing 2.5 servings.
So eating the whole bag just delivered 500 calories and probably triple the sodium you anticipated. I have to ask, why do they even do this? It feels like they're intentionally designing the package to trick us into thinking we're eating less.
Well, the history of how manufacturers are legally allowed to do this is actually fascinating. It traces back to the FDA's reference amounts customarily consumed, or RACCs.
RACCs?
Yeah. Decades ago, when the FDA established guidelines for what constitutes a serving, they based the numbers on dietary survey data from the late 1970s and 1980s.
Wait, really? The 70s? People genuinely ate smaller portions back then.
They did. And food manufacturers have historically fought very, very hard to keep those outdated, tiny serving sizes legally permissible on labels.
Oh, I see. Because if a company can legally define a few crackers as a serving, they get to print highly attractive, low-calorie, low-sodium numbers on the nutritional panel.
Exactly. It's a regulatory loophole that heavily favors the marketing department.
That is wild. Have there been any pushes to fix that?
The FDA has made pushes to update these RACCs to reflect modern eating habits, like requiring a 20-ounce soda to be labeled as 1 serving rather than 2.5, but the loophole still exists in a lot of snack foods.
And the biological danger here is that your body doesn't care about the FDA's math.
Not at all.
If you unknowingly eat 3 servings of a high-sodium food because the packaging implied it was a single portion, your kidneys still have to process that triple payload.
Which is why the author's new habit of establishing the serving size as step number 1 is so crucial. It's the only way to anchor the rest of the label in reality.
That makes total sense. And that anchor becomes critical when we look at the next line on the label. Sugar.
Yes, sugar is a big one.
The author points out that navigating the sugar content used to be this huge exercise in frustration because the label only showed total sugars.
Right, which was super misleading.
Yeah, it lumped the naturally occurring sugars found in, like a piece of fruit or plain dairy, into the exact same category as the high fructose corn syrup pumped into a soda.
But the FDA recently mandated that manufacturers separate added sugars from total sugars. And that fundamentally changed how we can evaluate food.
Because there's a huge biological difference, right?
A massive difference. It is all about the delivery mechanism and how your liver processes the energy. Natural sugars, like the fructose in an apple or the lactose in plain yogurt, they come naturally packaged in a complex matrix of fiber, water, and micronutrients.
Oh, I love the way you phrase that, a fibrous matrix. It acts like a time-release capsule.
Exactly.
When you eat an apple, your digestive system actually has to break down the cell walls to get to the sugar. It drips slowly into your bloodstream, causing this gentle, manageable rise in blood glucose that your insulin can easily handle.
But added sugars have no such matrix. When a manufacturer pumps raw sugar or syrups into a product, it enters your digestive tract freely available. It hits your bloodstream like a fire hose.
A fire hose of sugar. That sounds stressful for the body.
It is. The liver gets totally overwhelmed by the sudden influx of fructose. And lacking the capacity to process it all for immediate energy, it begins converting that excess sugar directly into triglycerides.
Which is fat.
Which is fat. This process de novo lipogenesis is a major driver of that metabolic sluggishness the author started feeling at 50.
And the craziest part is where they hide these added sugars. We're not just talking about cookies and cakes. Manufacturers hide added sugars in savory products to manipulate our palates.
Oh, everywhere. Pasta sauce is a classic example.
Yes, the author found massive amounts of added sugar in pasta sauces and salad dressings. I mean, tomatoes are naturally acidic. Instead of simmering the sauce for hours to bring out the natural sweetness like a traditional recipe would, industrial food producers just dump cheap added sugar into the vat.
Right, to artificially mask the acidity and hit a highly palatable flavor profile quickly.
So you think you're eating a savory Italian dinner, but metabolically, you are drinking a dessert.
It's true. But I really appreciate the author's approach to this. They aren't advocating for a zero-sugar existence.
Right, because that's just miserable.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. Instead, they keep added sugars aggressively low in their everyday staple foods like bread and sauces, so they can consciously spend their sugar allowance on actual treats they enjoy.
I love that. Spend it on the ice cream, not the pasta sauce.
Hmm.
And we see a really similar evolution in how the author approaches fat.
Oh, the fat paradigm shift.
Yeah, if you lived through the 1990s, remember the low-fat craze?
Oh, vividly.
The author admits to falling for it, just buying anything with a fat-free banner. But removing the fat from food removes the texture and the satiety factor. Fat is what makes food feel satisfying in your mouth, and it signals your brain that you are full.
Exactly. So when companies stripped it out, the food tasted like cardboard.
And what did they do to fix that? They replaced the lost fat with mountains of added sugar.
We literally traded a macronutrient that is essential for human health for a cheap metabolic disruptor.
It's wild looking back at it, especially because as we age, healthy fats are non-negotiable.
They really are. Think about your myelin sheath.
Oh, the insulation for your nerve cells.
Yes, it allows your brain to transmit signals quickly, and it is primarily composed of lipids or fats. Unsaturated fats, the kinds found in avocados, olive oil, and fatty fish, are critical for maintaining that cognitive infrastructure.
Not to mention reducing the systemic inflammation that causes joint pain.
Oh, absolutely. So the strategy here isn't running from the total fat number anymore. It's comparing the total fat to the saturated fat line.
Okay, so how do we balance that?
Well, if the food is heavily skewed towards saturated fats, which are often the cheap, solid at room temperature fats used in commercial baking to prolong shelf life, that is a known driver of LDL cholesterol.
Got it. But if the balance leans toward unsaturated, you're likely looking at a food that supports brain and heart health.
Precisely. Now, looking at grams of sodium, types of sugar, and fat profiles, that gives you the microview of a food. But the author also utilizes this brilliant macro view strategy.
Oh, right. Simply looking at the length of the ingredient list.
Yes. This is their primary defense against ultra-processed foods. If the ingredient list reads like a chemistry textbook filled with, polysorbates, artificial colors, and modified starches, the author uses that as a massive red flag.
Well, wait, I want to push back on this a little. Does this mean we have to completely abandon convenience? Like, throw away all processed food and make absolutely everything from scratch? Because honestly, that sounds exhausting.
And it is exhausting. The author experienced that exact fatigue. They initially tried to make absolutely everything from scratch and burned out very quickly.
I can imagine. What's the pragmatic relief here?
The breakthrough was learning to differentiate between benign processing and ultra-processing. We have to be careful not to demonize the concept of processing itself.
Right, because technically, chopping a carrot is processing. Freezing peas is processing.
Exactly. Canning and freezing are actually preservation methods that can lock in nutrients at peak freshness. A can of black beans or a bag of frozen broccoli might actually contain more available nutrients than fresh produce that has been degrading in the back of a delivery truck for a week.
That is such a good point. So the differentiator is really the intention behind the processing.
Yes. Buy frozen broccoli, the ingredient list is broccoli. You buy plain yogurt, it says milk and live cultures. The processing was just used to make a whole food convenient.
Whereas ultra-processed foods, they are engineered from the ground up.
Right. From cheap crop derivatives like soy, corn, and wheat. They're stripped of their nutrients, pulverized, and reassembled with industrial additives.
And they are engineered to hit what food scientists call the bliss point.
The bliss point, yes. It's the precise mathematical ratio of salt, sugar, and fat that perfectly maximizes the release of dopamine in your brain's reward center.
While simultaneously bypassing your body's natural satiety signals, it's almost sinister. They are scientifically calibrated to ensure that you do not feel full until the bag is empty.
And that long ingredient list, that is the blueprint of that engineering.
That is such a powerful way to look at it, which brings up a really vital step the author recommends.
Yeah.
Taking all of this information to a medical professional.
Yes. Once you know how to read the labels, you really need to know what targets your specific biology requires.
Right. The author advises bringing highly specific questions to your doctor, not just asking like, hey, how is my diet?
Because if you are over 50 and taking medications, food interactions become a serious variable. The pharmacology is complex.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Some statins used to manage cholesterol interact really poorly with grapefruit.
Really? Grapefruit?
Yeah. Grapefruit contains compounds that inhibit a specific enzyme in your small intestine, CYP3A4, which is responsible for breaking down the medication.
Oh, wow. So if that enzyme is inhibited, the medication builds up in your bloodstream to potentially toxic levels.
Exactly. And similarly, certain blood pressure medications cause your body to retain potassium. So suddenly, eating a diet massive in potassium-rich foods could actually disrupt your heart rhythm.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
But also why it's so important to talk to a professional.
Which is why the author's suggestion to ask for a referral to a registered dietitian is so powerful. Doctors are brilliant diagnosticians, but medical schools historically offer very few dedicated hours to practical nutrition.
Right. A dietitian is trained to take your lab results, your medications, and your lifestyle and translate these label reading skills into a sustainable daily reality.
Exactly.
You know, I feel like the entire premise of this deep dive boils down to the author's most liberating realization. You don't have to be a perfect eater.
No. Perfection is the enemy of consistency.
You can absolutely still buy convenience foods. You can still buy the occasional ultra-processed snack that you love.
Yeah.
But the paradigm shift is that you are no longer doing it blindly.
Right. You transition from being a passive target for food marketers to an informed consumer making a conscious trade-off.
Yes. Checking the serving size to anchor reality. Scanning the sodium to protect your vessels. Hunting down the added sugars hiding in your savory foods. Balancing the saturated fats against the unsaturated, and looking at the ingredient length to see if the food is engineered to trick your brain.
And honestly, it takes roughly 60 seconds to flip a box and read that panel, but that 1 minute fundamentally changes the chemical information you are uploading into your cells every single day.
It really does.
You know, if we look closely at the architecture of the modern grocery store, there is a reality that warrants deep reflection.
Look at that.
Well, we discussed how ultra-processed foods are mathematically formulated to hit that bliss point and bypass your satiety signals. So I encourage you to think about the items currently sitting in your own pantry right now.
Oh, a little pantry audit.
Yeah. Look at the brightly colored boxes and the convenient grab-and-go snacks. Are those items actually designed to nourish your cells, provide sustained energy, and protect your longevity? Or are they literally engineered by a multi-billion-dollar industry to ensure you simply cannot stop eating them until you need to buy another box?
Wow. That is the ultimate question to ask before anything goes into the cart, because until you turn that package around and decode the data on the back, you are letting the marketing department dictate your biology.
So there you have it. 5 simple things to look for the next time you flip a package over at the grocery store. Sodium, added sugars, ingredient list length, serving size, and the type of fat. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's really just about building a little more awareness, one shopping trip at a time. If you enjoyed this episode and know someone who might find it helpful too, I'd love for you to share it with them. That's how our little community continues to grow. And for more tips, resources, and everyday encouragement for life after 50, be sure to visit livingyourseniorlife.com. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. And as always, until next time, take care of yourself and live your best senior life.